The black, armored luxury sedan pulled up to the curb of my apartment complex in the sharp, blinding glare of the winter afternoon. Its polished paint mirrored the rusted railings and the cracked concrete of a building that smelled permanently of cheap laundry detergent and old floor wax. At first, I honestly thought the driver had the wrong address. Billionaires don't come to places like this. They don't belong in a forgotten neighborhood outside the industrial district, where the only view is a gravel parking lot and an overgrown chain-link fence. But then, the rear door opened. Chairman Sterling stepped out into the freezing wind, his tailored charcoal suit pristine, his gray hair neatly combed back with the sharp discipline of a man who used to command armies before he commanded global boards. He didn't look around with disgust. He didn't hesitate. He looked directly up at the second-floor balcony where I was standing, and then he walked up the creaking metal stairs. My neighbors stopped talking. An old man fixing his old pickup truck dropped his wrench, watching in absolute silence as two burly security guards in dark suits followed the old tycoon up to my door. When I opened the door, Chairman Sterling didn't look at my grease-stained jeans or my fading flannel shirt. He looked directly into my eyes. And for a long moment, nobody spoke. The silence was so heavy you could hear the distant roar of the highway. Then, his eyes slowly drifted down to my hand, where I was tightly holding a scratched, dented Silver War Zippo lighter. "Sarah Miller?" he asked, his voice unexpectedly quiet, but carrying a weight that made the air feel thin. "Yes, sir," I managed to say, my throat dry. He took a step closer, staring at the faded military insignia carved into the worn metal casing. "The lighter," he said softly, a strange shadow of emotion crossing his weathered face. "Have you opened the secret latch beneath the base yet?" Looking at the deep, ragged scratches on that old piece of steel, my mind suddenly fractured, pulling me backward into the dark. For the first time since my grandfather died, I realized that what my family had thrown away as worthless trash was never a piece of junk at all. And as the cold wind whipped through the open doorway, I was flooded with the bitter, burning memory of 3 days ago, the day my rich brother took everything from me, under the gray, merciless sky of my grandfather's funeral. The Charleston sky was the color of wet slate, pouring down a relentless, freezing rain that soaked straight through the fabric of my black trench coat. We stood on a muddy hillside, surrounding the mahogany casket of my grandfather, Sergeant Miller. He was a man who had survived the humid jungles of Vietnam and came back to build a metal manufacturing empire from absolute nothing. But looking around the small circle of mourners, it felt like the only thing people were mourning was the time they were losing by standing out in the cold. My older brother, Marcus, stood under a large, custom-branded golf umbrella held by his personal assistant. He never once looked at the casket. His thumb flew across his Dien Toi Tong Min screen, his face illuminated by the artificial blue glow as he tracked the opening prices of the stock market. Every few minutes, he would let out a quiet, impatient sigh, shifting his weight from one expensive Italian leather shoe to the other. To Marcus, our grandfather's death wasn't a tragedy. It was a minor logistical inconvenience that was delaying a multi-million-dollar corporate merger. Right next to him was our mother, her face perfectly made up, completely dry of any real tears. She spent the entire service adjusting her fur collar and scanning the crowd, waving subtly at the city council members and wealthy board investors who had shown up out of pure political obligation. When the pastor spoke about my grandfather's legendary work ethic and his decades of quiet charity, my mother leaned over to Marcus and whispered loud enough for me to hear, "Make sure the caterers at the gala have the premium champagne ready. We can look cheap in front of the Van Frat executives tonight." I felt a sickening knot tighten in my stomach. For the past 5 years, I was the only one who actually stayed by my grandfather's side. While Marcus was flying to tropical resorts, and my mother was hosting high society charity auctions, I was down on the greasy, deafening floors of our family's core manufacturing plant. I knew the rhythm of every machine, the heat of the welding sparks, and the exact engineering formulas that kept our company ahead of the competition. I had sacrificed my youth, my nights, and my hands to protect the legacy my grandfather built, while they treated me like a glorified mechanic. As the casket was finally lowered into the dark, muddy earth, Marcus turned around before the dirt even touched the wood. He didn't offer me a hand. And he didn't look at my tear-stained face. He just snapped his phone shut, tapped his driver on the shoulder, and began walking toward his waiting limousine. My mother followed him immediately, her high heels clicking sharply on the paved path. She didn't look back at the grave, and she didn't look back at me. I was left standing alone in the downpour, holding nothing but a wet program sheet, completely unaware that the real betrayal hadn't even begun yet. I didn't even have time to dry my clothes. After Marcus and my mother drove away in their warm, luxury limousine, leaving me stranded at the muddy cemetery, I had to walk 2 miles through the freezing rain to the nearest bus stop. By the time the crowded public transit dropped me off in the downtown financial district, the hem of my black coat was caked in gravel, and my shoes were completely soaked through. Marcus had sent a brutal, single-sentence text to my phone. The reading of Grandfather's will is at Bonzo p.m. sharp. If you relate, you forfeit everything. So, with my hands still freezing and shivering from the storm, I walked straight into the skyscraper and took the elevator up to the law firm. The air inside the family lawyer's office was thick with the scent of expensive mahogany polish and stale espresso, a sickening contrast to the wet mud I had just been standing in. Marcus sat across from the large oak desk, his tailored suit jacket unbuttoned as he leaned forward, practically vibrating with greed. My mother sat beside him, casually applying a fresh layer of pale pink lipstick in a compact mirror, completely untroubled by the fact that her only daughter was dripping dirty rainwater onto the plush carpet. I sat on a hard leather chair in the corner, holding myself tightly to stop the shaking, my skin pale and my hands rough and calloused from a 10-hour shift at the plant the night before. The lawyer cleared his throat, adjusting his spectacles, as he opened the thick manila folder containing my grandfather's final will and testament. To my grandson, Marcus Miller, the lawyer read, his voice flat and professional. I leave the full ownership and operational control of Miller Manufacturing, including the main production facilities, all commercial real estate holdings, and the liquid corporate accounts. Marcus didn't even try to hide his triumph. He let out a sharp, breathless laugh, snapping his fingers in victory, and immediately texting his assistant to finalize the Van Fraught merger papers. My mother patted his knee with a proud smile, whispering, "Well deserved, sweetheart. You are the true face of this family's future." The lawyer turned the page, his eyes briefly darting toward me before looking back down at the paper. "And to my granddaughter, Sarah Miller." He paused, as if double-checking the text to ensure he hadn't made a mistake. "I leave my personal military trunk and the Silver War Zippo lighter carried during my service in the United States Marine Corps." The room fell completely silent, except for the sudden, mocking chuckle that escaped Marcus's throat. "A lighter?" Marcus sneered, looking over at me with absolute contempt. "The old man left you a broken piece of military junk? Well, I guess it fits you perfectly. Sarah, you've always belonged in the dirt and oil of the factory floor anyway." My mother didn't say a word to defend me. She just closed her compact mirror with a sharp click, looking at my damp, miserable figure with a cold, pitying gaze. "Be grateful your grandfather left you anything at all, Sarah," she said smoothly. "Marcus has the corporate vision to lead this family. You simply don't have what it takes." But the nightmare didn't stop there. The moment we stepped out into the carpeted hallway after the meeting, Marcus stopped in front of me, his smile vanishing into a mask of pure malice. He reached into his breast pocket and slid a cold, white envelope into my hand. "What is this?" I asked, my voice trembling as the chill from the rainy funeral still lingered in my bones. "Your termination notice," Marcus said coldly. "As the new CEO, I am restructuring the company. Your position at the manufacturing plant is officially eliminated. Your security badge is deactivated, and your final paycheck has been frozen pending a full audit of the inventory." I stared at him, my heart shattering into a million pieces. "Marcus, I've given 5 years of my life to that plant. I know those machines better than anyone. I kept the blueprints safe for grandfather. You were just a glorified mechanic, Sarah," he barked, stepping into the waiting elevator alongside our mother. "And from this moment on, you are officially restricted from entering any Miller property. Find yourself a new place to starve." The elevator doors slid shut, cutting off the sight of his arrogant face, leaving me alone in the corridor with a frozen bank account, a termination letter, and a heavy, scratched silver Zippo that couldn't even produce a single spark. My new home was a cramped, 700-square-foot apartment located above a noisy auto body shop on the ragged edges of the city. Every time a mechanic used a pneumatic wrench downstairs, the floorboards beneath my feet vibrated. The ceiling had a dark water stain shaped like a cracked bone, and the window only looked out onto a graveyard of rusted shipping containers. With my bank account frozen by Marcus's corporate lawyers, I spent my first 2 nights eating instant ramen and wrapping myself in a thin wool blanket to block out the freezing drafts. But despite the cold and the bitter sting of my family's betrayal, I didn't cry. Grandfather had always told me that tears were just wasted water, and right now, I needed every ounce of strength I had left. On the 3rd night, as a heavy thunderstorm rattled the loose window panes, I pulled my grandfather's old military trunk out from under the bed. Inside, resting on top of his faded green Marine Corps uniform, was the Silver War Zippo. I sat down at the small wooden table, turned on a flickering desk lamp, and began to clean the dirt from its metal casing using a rag and a bottle of rubbing alcohol. The lighter was heavily dented and covered in deep, ugly scratches that looked like jagged claw marks. As I rubbed the silver surface, my mind drifted back to a warm summer evening 5 years ago. Grandfather and I had been sitting on the porch after a long day at the plant. He had pulled out this exact Zippo, turning it over in his rough, grease-stained fingers. I remembered asking him why he kept a lighter that didn't even work. He had looked out into the distance, his eyes growing soft with memories of a lifetime ago. "Sarah," he had said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. "This piece of steel survived the worst fire in the Quang Tri province in Morton Chin Bay Mihai. We were pinned down in a freezing mud trench for 3 days, surrounded by enemy fire. My squad was losing hope, shaking from the cold and the fear." He had rubbed his thumb over the scratches. "Just as I was doing now, I used this Zippo to strike a tiny flame. We couldn't build a real fire without giving away our position, so my men took turns holding this hot metal casing just to keep their fingers from freezing. We shared that single, hidden spark. In the dark, that little lighter wasn't just a tool, Sarah. It was a covenant. I promised a young lieutenant in that trench that as long as this steel remained whole, our brotherhood would never die. Money can buy a million factories, but it can never buy the honor of a man who kept his word in the mud." The memory faded, leaving me alone with the sound of the rain outside. I looked down at the Zippo under the harsh light of the desk lamp, and that when I noticed something strange. As the rubbing alcohol cleaned away decades of built-up grime, the deep scratches on the back of the casing began to catch the light differently. They weren't random marks from a battlefield. I leaned closer, my breath catching in my throat. The lines were incredibly straight, intersecting at perfect 90-degree angles. Having spent 5 years operating high-precision CNC machinery at the plant, my eyes instantly recognized the pattern. These were technical markings. Someone had used an industrial-grade engraving laser to etch a highly complex, microscopic grid system directly into the silver plating, disguised perfectly as battle damage. When I shook the lighter near my ear, there was no sound of cotton or fluid. Only a heavy, solid metallic click, like a deadbolt sliding into place deep within the core. Grandfather hadn't left me a piece of junk. He had left me a puzzle, and the realization made my blood run hot with a sudden, unshakable sense of hope. The breakthrough with the Zippo's hidden markings was cut short the following morning by a sudden, violent vibration from my phone. It was Marcus. I didn't even have time to say hello before his cold, frantic voice barked through the speaker. "Sarah, you need to get your things together. There is a car coming to pick you up in 30 minutes. I let out a dry, hollow laugh, looking around my damp, chilly apartment. A car? I thought I was restricted from Miller property. Marcus. I thought I was just a glorified mechanic who needed to find a new place to starve. Shut up and listen." Marcus snapped, his breath coming in shallow, stressed gasps. "Chairman Sterling from the Van Frat Group is refusing to sign the final merger papers until he meets the entire living lineage of Sergeant Miller. The corporate lawyers said if any direct heir is missing from the signing ceremony tonight, the contract becomes legally voidable. You are coming to the VIP gala at the Grand Ballroom downtown. Not because I want you there, but because you are a necessary legal signature on a piece of paper." Before I could even answer, He added. I instructed the driver to leave a dress on your doorstep. Put it on. Show up. And keep your mouth shut. Don't embarrass me. The line went dead. When I opened the front door, there was indeed a garment bag lying on the concrete floor. Inside was a cheap, plain black dress that looked like it belonged to a hotel waitress, along with a pair of flat, worn-out shoes. It was a deliberate, calculated insult. Marcus wanted me at that gala, but he wanted to ensure that anyone who looked at me would instantly know I was the outcast, the poor, disposable sibling who didn't belong among the wealthy elite. I looked back at the table where the scratched silver Zippo sat under the lamp. I didn't care about his money or his petty corporate games, but grandfather had spent his entire life protecting the family name. I wasn't going to let Marcus turn his legacy into a circus. I slipped the heavy silver lighter into the small concealed pocket of the dress and stepped out into the cold afternoon. The grand ballroom of the Grand Hyatt was a sickening display of extreme wealth. Pyramids of crystal champagne glasses caught the dazzling light of massive chandeliers, while waiters in white tuxedos glided past local politicians and corporate investors. The moment I arrived, Marcus didn't greet me with family affection. Instead, he grabbed my arm with a tight, painful grip and pulled me away from the main floor, dragging me toward the dim, narrow service hallway near the kitchens. You stay right here in the shadows, Marcus whispered fiercely, his eyes darting around nervously to make sure nobody saw us together. You do not talk to the investors. You do not touch the buffet. If Chairman Sterling asks for you, you walk out, sign the memorandum, and immediately disappear back into this hallway. You smell like motor oil, Sarah. Don't ruin the greatest night of my life. My mother appeared from around the corner, looking breathtakingly elegant in a silver silk gown that cost more than a year of my apartment's rent. She looked down at my cheap dress, her expression twisting into a look of absolute shame and disgust. She didn't ask how I was surviving, or if I had enough food. She just pulled a pristine white napkin from a tray and wiped a tiny, invisible speck of dust from her diamond necklace. Marcus is right, Sarah, she said, her voice dripping with ice. This night is about securing the Miller name in the global market. A girl who spends her days covered in industrial grease has no business standing under these chandeliers. Stay in the back where you belong, and let your brother take the crown. They walked away, leaving me alone in the cramped corridor, surrounded by the clattering of dirty dishes and the arrogant laughter of the high society just a few feet away. But as I reached into my pocket and felt the cold, solid weight of grandfather's Zippo, a strange, powerful calmness washed over me. The trap was set, but my family had no idea who was actually walking into it. The heavy crystal doors of the grand ballroom swung open, and a sudden, sharp silence fell over the 100-odd elites inside. Flanked by 4 stone-faced security details, Chairman Sterling walked into the room. He moved with a slow, unyielding authority that completely dominated the space. Marcus immediately smoothed his silk tie, a desperate, sycophantic smile plastering across his face as he pushed his way through the crowd of investors to reach the billionaire. My mother was right at his shoulder, her eyes gleaming with the predatory hunger of someone about to secure a fortune. Chairman Sterling. What an absolute honor, Marcus proclaimed, his voice boisterous and echoing through the silent room. He gestured aggressively to a velvet-covered signing table in the center of the floor, where a multi-million-dollar contract lay open. Everything is prepared. Our manufacturing plants are ready for expansion. The legal teams have cleared the assets. And as the sole leader of Miller Manufacturing, I am ready to sign. With a theatrical flourish, Marcus pulled a gold-plated fountain pen from his pocket and held it out, practically begging for the tycoon's approval. To add to his display of wealth, Marcus casually adjusted his sleeve, making sure his 6-figure diamond watch caught the light of the chandeliers. Chairman Sterling stopped. He didn't look at the gold pen, and he didn't look at the contract. His cold, gray eyes locked onto Marcus, completely unmoving. I did not fly across the country to look at your pens, young man, Sterling said, his voice dropping like an iron anchor in the middle of the ballroom. And I certainly did not come to buy walls and machinery. Where is the true heir of Sergeant Miller? Where is the keeper of the flame? Marcus blinked, his smile faltering for a fraction of a second before he let out a nervous, airy chuckle. Oh, Sir, if you mean our grandfather's old estate, I hold Mutchamphancham of the executive deeds right here. I am the only heir who matters. He signaled subtly to my mother, who stepped forward, holding out a jade ring namp Kim Kuang. Yes. Chairman, she chimed in smoothly. We even brought our family's most sacred heirloom to show our dedication to this merger. Sterling looked at the diamond ring with absolute indifference, as if it were a piece of plastic trash. That is not what I asked, the old billionaire growled, his patience visibly wearing thin. I asked for the flame. The covenant signed in blood in Motnin Chinchambe Mihai. If the Miller lineage has forgotten it, then this merger is dead. A wave of panicked murmurs rippled through the investors. Marcus' face turned an ashen white as he realized his $100 million deal was slipping through his fingers. He looked around wildly, utterly clueless. That was the moment I pushed open the heavy kitchen service door. The hinges let out a loud, metallic groan that cut straight through the tense silence of the ballroom. Wearing my cheap, plain black dress and worn-out flat shoes, I walked out of the shadows and directly onto the polished marble floor. The elite stared at me in shock, whispering in disgust at my appearance. Marcus' eyes bulged with pure rage. Sarah, what the hell are you doing? He roared, stepping forward to block me. Security, get this girl out of here. She is mentally unstable. She doesn't belong here. I ignored his shouting completely. I walked straight past my trembling mother, right up to the velvet signing table. With a calm, deliberate movement, I reached into my pocket, pulled out the heavy, scratched silverware Zippo, and placed it directly on top of the corporate contract. The flame is here. Chairman Sterling, I said clearly, my voice steady and unwavering. I am Sarah Miller, granddaughter of Sergeant Miller, and I am the one who keeps his word. For 3 agonizing seconds, the grand ballroom was so silent, you could hear the ice melting in the champagne buckets. Marcus let out a harsh, desperate laugh, stepping between me and the billionaire. Chairman Sterling, please ignore her. This is my estranged sister. She a disgruntled factory hand who was fired days ago for incompetence. That thing she just threw on your table is a broken piece of military garbage that belonged to an old man who lost his mind before he died. Security, drag her out right now. 2 burly guards moved toward me, their heavy boots clicking menacingly against the marble. Do not touch her. The roar that erupted from Chairman Sterling was so violent that the guards instantly froze in their tracks. The old billionaire was staring at the scratched silver Zippo, his face completely drained of color, his chest heaving under his tailored suit. A tremor started in his hands, growing so severe that he dropped his gold fountain pen, letting it roll uselessly across the floor. Tears, thick and genuine, began to well up in the eyes of the man who controlled half the global supply chain. To the absolute horror and speechlessness of my mother, my brother, and every billionaire in the room, Chairman Sterling didn't call the guards. Instead, he took 2 slow, trembling steps forward, bowed his head, and dropped heavily onto one knee directly in front of me. Marcus' jaw literally fell open. My mother clutched her diamond necklace so hard the string nearly snapped. Sir, Marcus choked out, his voice cracking. What? What are you doing? She's nobody. Sterling completely ignored him, keeping his knee firmly on the floor. He reached out with both hands, lifting the dented, scratched Zippo off the contract as if it were a holy relic. 34 years, Sterling whispered, his voice cracking with immense emotion as he looked up at me. Your grandfather carried me 3 miles through a burning swamp with shrapnel in his leg. When the rescue choppers couldn't see us through the smoke, he used this exact lighter to signal them. He told me that one day, when the world became too cold and greedy, his true heir would bring this Nganlur back to me. You are his blood, Sarah. You have his eyes. Sterling stood up, his emotional warmth instantly freezing back into absolute corporate steel as he turned toward his chief tech advisor. Bring the key, he ordered. The advisor stepped forward, carrying a small, specialized electronic probe. He didn't touch the top of the lighter. Instead, he inserted a tiny titanium pin into a microscopic, laser-etched indentation hidden right beneath the hinge at the base, a detail I had just discovered under my desk lamp the night before. With a sharp, mechanical click, The entire bottom plate of the Zippo slid open. It wasn't a fluid compartment. Inside sat a heavy, custom-milled titanium cold storage microchip, engraved with my grandfather's military serial number. "What is that?" my mother whispered, her face pale as a ghost. Sterling picked up the chip, his eyes piercing into Marcus like daggers. "Your grandfather built Miller Manufacturing." Marcus. But he wasn't a fool. He knew your greed would destroy his life's work. "This chip contains the proprietary encrypted source code and global patent keys for every single automated CNC machine and aerospace alloy formula your company uses. Without this chip, your factories are just empty brick buildings full of useless, unpowered metal." Sterling took the multi-million-dollar merger contract from the table, looked Marcus dead in the eye, and ripped it completely in half. "Our investment of $100 million will be signed exclusively with a new entity led solely by Sarah Miller," Sterling announced, his voice echoing with absolute authority through the ballroom. "As for Miller Manufacturing, my banks will be calling in your outstanding lines of credit by 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. You are finished, Marcus." Marcus's knees buckled, and he collapsed sideways onto the floor, his expensive diamond watch smashing against the hard marble, while my mother sank into a nearby chair, burying her face in her hands. 20 minutes later, I walked out of the Grand Hyatt's gilded lobby and into the cool, crisp night air. The thunderstorm had passed, leaving the city streets glistening under the amber glow of the streetlights. As I walked toward Chairman Sterling's waiting vehicle, a frantic, splashing sound echoed from behind. I turned around to see Marcus and my mother running down the concrete steps into the rain, their expensive clothes ruined, their faces distorted with desperation and sheer panic. "Sarah!" "Wait. Please. Just stop!" Marcus screamed, slipping on the wet pavement and nearly falling into a puddle. He lunged forward, trying to grab the sleeve of my coat, but Sterling's security guards instantly stepped in, blocking him with an iron wall of muscle. Marcus fell to his knees in the wet gravel, tears finally streaming down his face, mixing with the rainwater. "You can't do this to us, Sarah. We family. If Sterling freezes our credit lines, the banks will take everything by tomorrow afternoon. The house, the cars, it will all be gone. Why did the old man do this to me? Why did he cheat me? Why did he love you more than me?" My mother stood behind him, shivering in her ruined silver silk gown, her hands trembling as she looked at me with begging eyes. "Please, Sarah," she choked out, her voice stripped of all its former high society arrogance. "Tell Chairman Sterling to sign the papers. We made a mistake. Okay. But you my daughter. We are your blood." I looked down at my brother groveling in the dirt, and then at the mother who had looked at me with disgust just an hour ago. I felt no anger. I felt no urge to scream or mock them. I reached into my pocket, my fingers brushing against the heavy, solid silver casing of grandfather's Zippo. I held it tightly, feeling the warmth of my own hand reflected in the metal. I rolled down the window of the luxury sedan, looked directly into Marcus's desperate, hollow eyes, and delivered the truth he was never smart enough to understand. Grandfather didn't leave me this Zippo because he loved me more. "Marcus," I said softly, my voice cutting through the quiet night air. "He left it to me because he trusted me more. He knew that money can buy accomplices, but only honor can build a brotherhood." Without waiting for a response, I rolled the window back up, cutting off their cries as the limousine smoothly pulled away from the curb and merged into the dark, peaceful night. True strength doesn't roar. It doesn't flaunt itself under crystal chandeliers or wear diamond watches to hide its emptiness. True strength is a quiet, steady flame carried through the coldest storms and the deepest betrayals, waiting patiently for the moment the darkness finally breaks. My family thought they had stripped me of my inheritance, but grandfather had given me the only asset that truly mattered: my dignity. If you have ever been looked down upon by the very people who were supposed to protect you, or if you are quietly carrying a heavy burden while staying true to your values, remember that your scratches and your scars are not signs of weakness. They are your technical markings. They are proof that you survived the fire. What is the greatest piece of wisdom or the most meaningful token your grandparents ever passed down to you? Did it teach you about wealth? Or did it teach you about honor? Let me know your thoughts and share your own family stories in the comments section below. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button to join our community of silent strength. Until next time, keep your flame burning.